I'm Aaron Murakami from Spokane, Washington with emediapress.com. And been a little while since we've had one of these live calls. I think the last one was a live call with Eric, Peter Lindemann, and myself, kind of going over and doing some commentary on the old classic free energy research video from Borderlands, and that's on the blog post. And I think that free energy research video is also a free video on ericpdollard.com. Today is July 12th, 2025. It's 12 o'clock Pacific Daylight Savings Time here in Spokane, Washington. The topic of today's call is basically going to be focusing on the Integratron, which is an interesting building right at Landers, California. And Eric can give you some pretty wild history on that. He's been wanting to do this for a while. So a couple announcements. I'm always getting emails asking if we're going to be doing another conference, and the answer is yes. Last year, I had to pretty much take off most of the year to take care of my mom, who passed this last February of this year. So I'm kind of getting caught up on some projects that when Paul Babcock died, we were in the middle of 4 or 5 projects. So there's one particular one that I'm dedicating pretty much full time to. And as soon as I get done with that, I'm going to be heading to Tonopah to work with Eric on a project that we've mentioned on some other calls. But we'll probably discuss that more when I get down there so we can do some video documentation on some of the projects and everything going on down there. Right now, so I'm getting back into the groove of sending out energy times somewhat kind of regularly. That's where most of the announcements goes on. So if you go to emediapress.com/energy times, you can sign up for the free newsletter. And that's where the announcements on any conference updates, will be coming out. These kind of live calls, any kind of new blog posts or new books or videos or anything like that, or products. Finally, I got the RPX Bedini's sideband generator put back into production. Got about 160 units being made right now. I'm going to have 40 short-term. Those are available for pre-purchase on emediapress.com. So if you go to emediapress.com, first thing at the top of the page, you'll see an RPX banner there, and you can click on that if you want to learn more about that. It's basically a universal kind of harmonic generator, which you can use the internal audio sweep generator in there, or you can do all kinds of custom stuff by plugging in an external signal generator. I think there's only 8 left of the 40 out of the 160, because I'm getting 40 circuit boards early so I can complete those sooner at my shop. And then the other 120 will be whenever I get the lead time from the circuit board company where they can do the full assembly on the 120. Then I'll announce taking pre-orders for those. There's a couple MWOs that are ready to launch, ready to be taken to the shipping company at any time. If anybody is looking for the full copper ring antenna multi-wave oscillator or the PC board one. And then, yeah, as far as the conference, I do plan on having one in 2026. I don't know what the whole agenda is going to be or even when it's going to be. I don't want to have it on the weekend, the 4th of July weekend anymore. It gets a little bit kind of hectic, so it might be at the end of June or later on in July, and possibly all the way up into September. I'll take some surveys and stuff and just see what kind of works best for everybody. But most importantly, it'll be whatever works best for whoever's going to be presenting. And when I decide to move forward with the conference, my goal this year is basically to focus on product creation. And so one product that I'm working on behind the scenes right now is going to be simultaneously 3 products. And then there's 2 more that I want to get completed by the end of the year so I can at least launch those at the next conference. And so we'll keep you updated on all that. Down in Tonopah, where EPD Laboratories is, which is a 501c3 nonprofit. It's a Nevada nonprofit corporation, which basically survives solely on your donations. And if you go to ericpdollard.com, and I'm going to bring that website up, which is the EPD Laboratory official website. I'll do a screen share here in just a moment. Can you see your website there, Eric?
Yeah.
Okay, so on ericpdollar.com, if you click this donate link button in the main menu bar there, that'll take you to this page where you can make a PayPal donation. You can do a one-time donation or recurring. Bitcoin, little couple times people have donated some small amounts. Or you can send a check or money order to this address here in Spokane, and then I just sign those checks and send them down to the bank in Tonopah. And those donations go to parts, materials, labor, some travel and food like that for some different people to go down there and help with the projects. In the past several Zoom calls, with the exception of the one with Peter Lindemann, we already went into quite a bit about what the goals are with the current projects, with sending the seismic signals from the lines on the land out behind the shop to pick up these Earth signals, which can be used for seismic forecasting purposes. And, there's the plan for a full-blown type of system like what Eric kind of had in Landers, California before. And actually, if you go to ericpdollar.com and you go into the blog, you can search for Landers, and you will see a whole bunch of pictures of this facility that Eric and his associates had put together over the course of many years. It's never going to be replicated like that, but there's sections of it that is intended to be replicated down in Tonopah. But short term, Haka says, and Justin Miller and Connor Fisher and some others are looking short term at using some type of Wi-Fi device to take these signals and be able to broadcast them on the internet. There'll be a free version of that, so you can log into the website and hear these signals and kind of see what's going on. And then there'll be a paid version, which includes more info. So anyway, other than that, the couple of the last blogs that I posted, there was one which years ago, somebody named Scott Hensler, he used to have a show called the Tinfoil Hat Club or something like that. He had a podcast with all this interesting, crazy, wild conspiracy stuff and whatever. But one of the interviews that he did was with Eric, going over some of the history of the Integratron, which is this dome-shaped building. I'll show a quick picture here. So can you still see that picture there, Eric?
Yeah.
Okay, so this Integratron picture is kind of an interesting building, which was for rejuvenation, time travel, teleportation, whatever. It had all this mystery surrounding it and everything, and Eric will give you the straight story on that. And one of the last blog posts I did was Eric wanted to share an excerpt from his presentation called the Four-Quadrant Theory, the Four-Quadrant Representation of Electricity, I think is the name of
I
it.
think that's it. Yeah.
Okay. And are you able to turn your volume up, Eric, or maybe scoot a little bit closer to the computer? It's a little bit kind of muffled.
Okay.
And I'm going to pull up the website for the Four-Quadrant Theory.com. Do a quick screen share on that, then we'll turn it over to Eric. So on fourquadranttheory.com, and I don't know how long that domain is going to last, because over the years, a lot of the different presentations had a unique dedicated domain name. And that grew to where there were almost 100 domain names, which got kind of ridiculous. And all those products are in emediapress.com. So little by little, I'm just letting those expire. But if you go to emediapress.com and you type in Four Quadrant in the product search bar at the top right of the page, it'll come up with that presentation. But right here was actually, I think, Eric's first presentation at the second Energy Science and Technology Conference, which was in 2013. So the second ESTC conference was Eric's first conference, and this was about, well, without even knowing, it's probably going to be a 4-hour presentation because most of them are. And there's a PowerPoint that comes with this. There's the full video presentation, and there's a segment inside of here that's dedicated and goes quite a bit into the Integratron. And that excerpt was put as, I think, a free video on my YouTube channel. So if you go to youtube.com and you go /Aaron Murakami, it'll forward you right to my channel. And then in this channel, you can see some of these videos here. At least I thought I put the excerpt out here. Yeah, the real Integratron explained is what this little thumbnail shows, but it's Integratron from the 4-quadrant representation of electricity. It's a 14-minute excerpt. If you haven't seen that or the Scott Hensler interview, you can search those on the blog on emediapress.com to get a little bit more updated on some other parts of the Integratron concept. So with that, Eric, we can just kick it off with whatever you want to go into. Unless you have some other announcements or whatever, we can just go straight into the Integratron. And then please hold your questions for the end. I'll open up for those. And if you post a question in the chat, that'll be a little bit harder to get to. But we'll just kind of play it by ear. And it's 12:16 right now. I have to have this wrapped up around 1:45 or so. I have an appointment a little bit after 2. So we have about an hour and a half, about 90 minutes or so from now. Hopefully we can crunch it into that time. So go for it, Eric.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is, because the last video was the technical aspects of the Integratron, from what I remember and what I learned, obviously it's much deeper than that. And I'm going to concentrate a little more on how I got involved with this, which is, to quote Jerry Vassilatos, radio history is much stranger than fiction. And this is a really strange one. So now I want to point out that at the onset, it was not something that I in any way was inclined to get involved with, particularly when I started hearing the words about the space people and the fact that it was in Southern California, which me as a Northern Californian had always had a dim view of, but fate forced me rather vigorously into the Integratron. So I will get into the step-by-step process of how that happened. So there's 2 things in my life that basically are the reason why you see me sitting in front of you. Was the Marconi Powerhouse in Bolinas, California, operated by Radio Corporation of America. And then there was the Integratron and what followed the Integratron and my efforts in landers. So this span in my life was from 1966 to 2011, from age 14 to 59, or in other words, 45 years of effort in my life that where I was able to produce many of these things. So the RCA situation in Bolinas, the station and all that, there's another Borderlands video that is out floating around. And also there's something I believe Aaron has called Wireless Giant of the Pacific, and that kind of gets into what's going on with the RCA station. And what I plan to do is to repeat what we're doing presently with the Integratron, with the RCA station in Bolinas, based on the video that was done a long, long time ago, unfortunately, before all the details were fully understood. So in 1982, I began work in San Francisco on refurbishing a World War II Navy LSM ship, and met a person that was one of my first, how would you say, benefactors, the owner of the vessel, Captain Don Hughes. This was in Pier 3 in San Francisco. Here's where I worked on my 4-quadrant theory of alternating current from the work of Steinmetz. And that is on the internet as the 4-quadrant representation of the alternating electric wave. And Steinmetz had pointed out in his books that the accepted understanding of alternating current power is false and has to be approached in a completely different manner based on his system of versors, but that information is not available to anyone in the general education process. So now what was interesting, and one of the things that endeared me to Captain Hughes is initially we got into discussion and he was kind of pushing me on why I was so different than other people and how I could do all these things that were generally regarded as impossible, including rebuilding his ship without screwing it up. And he was wondering what these books were that I was always carrying off to the coffee shop in North Beach. And I told him I was working on the writings of Steinmetz on alternating current. And he goes, I went to Steinmetz High School in Chicago. And at that point, he was my patron. And I was his miracle worker, as they called me in the shipyard, the wizard. So at any rate, as I was entering and exiting Pier 3 in the course of my effort there and my trips to Bolinas and Sonoma State and all the things I had gone, I met an old friend of mine from Project One, a guy named Mark Greenspan, and he had his television repair shop next to my RCA laboratory, and we became, of course, very good friends. And I hadn't seen him in years, and he, wanted to know what I was working on, and I had my engine room clothes on and the whole thing. And obviously, I was deep in the grease and involved in something, and he was interested in that. We were talking, and then he mentions, hey, there's this guy that lives in the same house that I do, and he's got this thing down in the desert. He goes, I don't know, it sounds crazy or what have you. And he's searching for someone that can make this thing work. And I told him that you are the only guy on Earth that could possibly make anything like this work. And that was the Integratron. So basically, I followed through, went and visited this person. His name was Don Lockwood. And from that point on, we became lifelong friends. And he explained his debacle that Van Tassel had died in 1978, and presently he had gained custody of the Integratron. It had not been fully exorcised yet of the human infections that prevailed there, but that was part of my job, was to perform the exorcism. And at any rate, I wasn't really reluctant. I was reluctant to go there, and I had my own stuff to work on, this Bolinas and all that. And so, but he kind of got adopted by us on the ship because he worked on engines and he knew about the big industrial stuff. And he discussed his thing with the Integratron, and that, that this was a state that he inherited, and he wanted me to help him figure out how it worked. So basically, I wasn't that enthused about going down there, but we stayed friends for a long time. And so I continued my 4-quadrant work. And then our ship needed hull repair. We went to the Richmond shipyard. And situations were a little weird there, and I had to kind of exercise my authority as an electrical engineer to keep things going. And so I was able to do experiments on the 1 to 10 megawatt level, interacting with the 600 amp, 12,470 volt 3-phase power line that came from the substation to the shipyard. I basically had 10 megawatts of substations at my disposal there and a lot of interesting equipment. So basically, my mathematical fooling around had told me that, because I still believed in the possibility of some kind of free energy then, even though it was an error in my mathematics, it indicated that if I had created 1 megawatt of negative reactance volt amperes, back to the substation, that electrical energy will be produced in the space between the wires of the transmission line back to the substation. And the leaseholder of the shipyard was also pissed off at the power company because they weren't really cooperating with his billing situation, which his electrical bill was running between $25,000 and $50,000 a month, which is not unusual for a facility that size, but they were not cooperating with the power factor situation. So at any rate, we fired up a bank of 10 synchronous motors and turned them into synchronous reactors and started increasing the negative reactance offered to the power company. And then we went to the meter shack, and the power company had the meter pinned so that we would not get credited for our volt ampere reactive generation. So we decided to give them a full blast. And that proceeded to knock the entire city of Richmond off the grid. And I was in the PG&E boardroom the next morning. And that kind of raised the overall voodoo. And of course, just thrilled Lockwood, because here was an example of this 4-quadrant thing that he was so wrapped up in. So at any rate, so Lockwood goes off for a while, and he goes up to someplace, I don't know, and he comes back and he tells me this cockamamie story that he just visited some woman that walked out of the mountain of Mount Shasta in Northern California. Come on, Don. I don't want to hear that shit. Please, don't lay it on me. Oh, no. She gave me a diagram, and this will prove if you're the person to finish the Integratron. I go, great. What diagram? So he pulls out this little piece of paper, and it's got a circle with the right triangle drawn in it. And my notebook, which I'll still remember was open to page 6, had the exact same drawing, the same everything about it. And I couldn't say anything after that. I didn't know what to believe, whether I was being set up or what have you. But at any rate, I was starting to see that there was some very powerful voodoo involved, and it was accumulating. So what really set the whole situation off is there was a big fracas between the leaseholder, the Navy, the Port of Richmond, and all that. And the situation is so convoluted that it's classified, and I could not tell you any names or businesses or any, I can't talk about it at all. But I had discovered in my rounds, there was what had happened is the power company had turned the power off during the lapse of the primary lease. And because of what I did with PG&E, they were acceptable to me making sure that they could close the breakers and re-energize the shipyard without any mishap. And the port officer, wanted that to happen. And so I was the guy. We were basically keeping the place lit up by the 3-phase bus on our ship, and what have you, which of course cost us diesel fuel. So at any rate, the first thing to do is, is to inspect the oil level and all the circuit breakers and what have you, and make sure that, nothing's been tampered with. And I found that that 2 of the substations had been sabotaged, including one where the drain valve on the substation transformer was opened, and raw polychlorinated biphenyls were pouring in the San Francisco Bay. Big no-no. So what was expected is the power would just be turned back on. There would be several violent explosions, and then the place would be condemned. That was the objective in this matter. So what I did is I went down to the engine room, and you're required to have a Coast Guard 911 number on all overboard discharge pump controllers. So I took that number down. It was late in the day, and called the number and told them what I experienced and what have you. And then that was that. And then, we drank our beer and ate and went back to bed. And I got up next morning, and it was like something out of some kind of movie. The whole pier was filled with all these government vehicles and Coast Guard and Navy. And it was like a big semicircle pointed at me, and somebody comes on board and asks, "Where is Eric Dollard?" And it turned into quite a fracas after that, and I had to get out of there. I was advised by the authorities that it would be good to operate in another neighborhood for a while the conflagration finally burned itself out. And so I moved to the Integratron. And that's basically how it began. The whole thing was kind of creepy, but at any rate, I had a mission to do, and that was to first exorcise the place of all the delinquent and what have you elements, and get all the junk out of there. And then at that point, when I got all the junk out, somehow what was left was like, I don't think there's anyone alive that remembers what a Heath kit is anymore, but it used to be you could get a stereo or a ham radio transmitter or what have you, and you build the thing yourself. They would supply the parts and the diagrams and all that. And it was a Heath kit to build some kind of capacitor transformer arrangement, and it was basically all cut to fit dimensions of the building. So at that point, I had begun to, okay, well, what's necessary to put this thing together? And that's what I gave the presentation on, was in the Aaron's conference, was what the basic physical layout was of that. I can't remember all the details. I was pretty sharp on it at the time, and I had notebooks on it in my Landers facility, but that stuff all disappeared. And it's irrelevant at this point anyway, because the place is occupied and much damage has been done to the actual transformer materials. So I started finding out Don Lockwood would bring me around to all these various people in the Southern California area, a lot of trips to LA, the last of the survivors of the Integratron era, and I would get everybody's fish story. Some things, were absolutely lunacy. Other ones were quite informative. The voodoo was very strong. People would always show up with key information and contribute, materials and what have you to the effort. So I was, as well as figuring out the Integratron, I was continuing the research that I had done in the Marconi Wireless Building in Bolinas, which later became known as the Cosmic Induction Generator. So I got to talk with Van Tassel's son-in-law. His name was Daniel Boone. He was kind of a outback miner type and what have you, but he was allegedly the person that made the first contact with the so-called extraterrestrials, and he explained what it was they said, what they were after, and what he had experienced. I could neither confirm nor deny any of what he said. I just simply had to take it in. Another interesting connection appeared out of this is Don decided to take me down to what was called the psychotronics meeting in Los Angeles, which was kind of a collection of all the guys that worked at Lockheed and all these other, governmental facilities and experimenters and what have you. And it's a place where they all got together and kind of talked about their exotic electronic and electrical fantasies and the space people and all that. So at any rate, I went there with Don, and we would stay in this motorhome overnight down there, and then, kind of get all charged up for, 2-hour, 3-hour meeting or what have you. Later, I would give lots of demonstrations, and I ended up getting affiliated with a very influential individual in this crowd, a person by the name of Bob Beck, which I think probably some people still remember. And he was, he didn't contribute a lot of money, but he set me up very good. And it was kind of funny how the thing worked out that first night. He came in there and what have you, and they went around and, okay, everybody, give your name, where you're from, and what you're interested in. There was probably about 40, 50 people there. And so they started on one corner. And then they zigzagged their way around, and then they came up from behind me. So Lockwood was in front of me. So at any rate, they go, "What's your name and what do you do?" And I gave them my name, and I told them that I'm building the Integratron. And every single person's eyes immediately turned around and stared at me like I was the second coming of Jesus Christ. I didn't know what to say. But that gave me my fame, and that's where things continued. So various other little things popped up and what have you that just kind of was kind of creepy. There was, like, obviously a force involved to move this project forward. And then I found out that from Lockwood, who was a good friend of Van Tassel's, that Howard Hughes would show up. Well, along that axis is Hughes's facilities in Los Angeles. My knowledge is of the Hughes Fullerton facility, which generated all their electronic equipment, some really sophisticated stuff for the time. Then Edwards Air Force Base, which was basically in charge of the experimental aircraft. The Nellis Air Force Base, which was in charge of the so-called Area 51, where Hughes had his own facility. So, and I later learned when I was working in the surplus business for all this exotic use stuff and what have you, a lot of which I can't talk about, but these people knew Van Tassel and they didn't like him. So I knew there was some kind of connection there, but Lockwood revealed to me, now again, I'm just giving an account. I can't say any of this happened, but there's no reason why he would lie to me, is that Howard Hughes would show up every couple of months with a big kind of paper bag wrapped up chunk, which he would put in the freezer. And Don told me that that was large quantities of money to help Van Tassel build the Integratron. And if you look at the architecture and the construction of that building and all the experiments and the materials they bought, that's not something people paid for out of their retirement pensions or donations. That by today's money, that to construct that building would probably at least be $10 million. You can find anybody that could even do it right. So obviously there was something real to this. But then, just as what happened in Bolinas, the common wheel shows up. That's WEAL. And they take the place away from Lockwood. And they try to hijack all of my own laboratory equipment. And that was the end of the Integratron. And then the women in white ended up with it. I moved in with a deranged World War II veteran named Walter DeRoche, who was had the same dream that I did, as he wanted his own military communications base. So over 30 years, that's what I built there, a lot with the help of RCA, supplying materials, and the LA Department of Water and Power were the main sources of material for that project. And then when it was finished, it was destroyed. And here we are today.
I'm going to show a picture of the landers page. Here, just a second here. Can you see that on your screen, Eric?
Yeah, it's there.
Okay. So on ericpdollard.com, if you hit this blog button or somewhere in the left column, you can search here. And if you type in landers, this is just kind of a photo gallery. This is put here April 16th, 2018. But this is the antenna field and a lot of the equipment that was built. And you can kind of look at the complexity of all this stuff. It's,
I want to add something at this point. As I see a lot of these snippets on the commentary page saying Eric never built anything that worked. Well, what are you looking at? You want to try building that? Out of junk? And it looks like it came right from Western Electric. Everything you see there was all built by myself. from parts gleaned by working in the surplus business for 20 years in Los Angeles to get all the little goodies before they disappeared from all those spooky aerospace companies.
Yeah, there's a lot.
So this is where I developed my advanced warning system for earthquakes, or what we call the Advanced Seismic Warning System, or ASW. For those in the know, those three letters will give you some of the other possibilities of what can be done with this.
So here's the chart with, what is it, above, below ground signals, solar flux, and physical vibration in the ground, right? Those four?
Yeah. The top is ground vibration. The middle is a pair of electrostatic activity between the Earth and space. That's the red one. And then the green one is the electrostatic activity between the surface of the Earth and its interior. And the bottom is the solar flux, measured at a wavelength of 10.7 centimeters at a reference power level of 10 to the minus 22nd watts. And then the vertical lines with the little markers on the top are significant earthquakes, ones of like 6 or greater. And this was recorded from the instruments for 1 year by Walt. He was the station operator while I wasn't around, and the place became kind of famous for when Walt would start running around screaming and calling all his friends that there's going to be an earthquake. There would be one. So this is kind of what I'm trying to duplicate now, but not under the favorable circumstances that existed at the time, and a lot of other complications. So
with the above and below ground signals here, which one are we trying to get on the internet?
Right now, because of the NV energy zero sequence jamming, it's absolutely impossible to receive out of the ground. It's completely flooded with zero sequence waveforms. It's outrageous. It's got to be in the millions of volt amperes reactive. So that's going to take a very determined effort to get rid of, if even possible. So the overground is the one that we're going to use now, because that's relatively free of interference, and then we can take a sample of the interference and inject it out of phase and come up with a pretty interference-free signal. And as far as the amplifiers go, there's a lot more advancement now than there has been since the Landers' time, because here I developed a whole new approach in amplifier design, which is what we're going to try to produce and sell as a consumer device, make some money. But at any rate, the amplifiers and the networks involved in this will be unlike anything anyone else has ever really done. Most of this stuff has just been done with little toy devices that are overwhelmed by interference and can't separate the signal from the noise. So it's expected that that once this system is fully developed, it will probably provide the best signal quantity for the electrical activity that exists from the surface of the Earth outwards, and to a small extent inside the Earth. The main problem at this point is there's very few people left to help me with this, so it's a rather slow process. I'd say at this rate, probably another year or year and a half before this thing is finally in full fidelity on the air. Possibly by the end of the year, we can have a basic internet connection, because it is receiving now with more basic equipment. And that's it's still much better than anything in private hands, because the antenna aperture is enormous. It's 4,800 feet long. So that's not something you put up in your backyard, and it's in a relatively interference-free zone. So there's two objectives here. One is to get this thing on the internet as soon as possible. And the other thing is to get the Tesla test platform energized so that we will start transmitting a regular Tesla longitudinal signal in the medium frequency band into the Earth. And because it'll be on the air all the time, people can experiment to see if they can pick it up or what have you. We've already gave some demonstrations of its range to the PRC-47 in my car, and a receiving station on the other side of Death Valley that picked up the signal in a very anomalous manner. So that's basically, those are the two primary objectives here right now, because the basic structure is already built. Now it's a matter of like final hookups, and the internet connection is the big complication right now. Otherwise, the rest of the stuff is pretty much procedural. We've got to put up one more pole. You can chisel the hole in the rock to put the pole in, and we got to put a roof on the shack and the solar panels and all that. So power system. It's going to be a rather lengthy project because of the multiple voltages involved. So as labor shows up sporadically, then we inch forward. At any rate, thus far, the outside plant is rather remarkable in that the whole thing is over 2 miles long, and the right-of-way is 4 miles long, and we still have many undeveloped acres for antennas that can be used for other purposes. So we got a good start. We got the seismograph mine. So that's a big chunk of money to get the seismographs on the internet. But right now, the Earth signal thing and the Tesla beacon do not require excessive quantities of money. They only require something that's almost as hard to get, and that's called human cooperation. So that's where all of this is at. So I think at this point, whatever you have to say, Aaron, and then people can start asking questions.
Okay. Can you mention something about the connection between the Integratron and the Lakhovsky multi-wave oscillator? Because Bob Beck was a part of that conversation that you're explaining, and Bob Beck was one of the original ones who started the conversation up about the Lakhovsky multi-wave oscillator more in the so-called recent era. I mean, a few decades ago. And if it wasn't for some of his efforts, a lot of people might have not have heard about it. But was there something that there was some inspiration with the Lakhovsky multi-wave oscillator or something where some of the thought behind that was put into the Integratron or something like that? What's the truth to that?
So basically, Van Tassel specifically mentions the Lakhovsky multi-wave oscillator in connection with his efforts. Now, at that time, that was late 50s, mid 50s. The suppression of Tesla, the suppression of Wilhelm Reich, anything of that genre, which would include Lakhovsky. By the end of World War II, all of that material had completely submerged. There was no knowledge anymore of that other than what someone might be able to, like I did with Steinmetz and Tesla, pick up the little pieces and follow the trail. So there's an organization that got started at the same time that I have to point out this Integratron thing as the reaction I got from the audience when I, stood up and stated my purpose. This was a big thing in Southern California, really big thing in Southern California. Amongst, you might say, the space people goofballs. But a lot of these people held serious jobs in big aerospace companies. So who's to say who's a goofball and who's not? So what got started, which was prominent at that time, was a little stapled together newsletter called Borderland Sciences Research Foundation, started by a guy named Meade Lane. And this is because of the Integratron and this whole kind of mass effort. The Lakhovsky MWO was one of the first things to be discussed. And, a little cardboard tube and plastic bottle things and what have you. And Bob Beck he had a lot of knowledge of these things on a technical level. And he basically built at that time, which would be the mid-60s, the first commercial Lakhovsky MWO based on his interpretation. So the Integratron, Borderland Sciences, Bob Beck and Ed Skilling, those are the people that reawakened the idea of the Lakhovsky multi-wave oscillator, and then it held in there until recent time. I don't think it was maybe 5 years ago or something, where some of this stuff was found, in some closet somewhere over in Europe, and the whole apparatus was ready to plug in and turn on. And then that started a whole resurgence where now I've been led to believe that the European Union actually considers the Lakhovsky apparatus something of primary interest to the European Union. Not that any techno nerd is going to do anything with it that will be anything novel or even work, but because they always dominate the situation. But at any rate, it is interesting to see that it's excited that level of interest, because of all of this stuff that in general I have a very low regard for is, for instance, the MWO that you have available. There's 800,000 volt amperes reactive flowing in the space between those two antennas, and that tells me that there's something there. And there seems to be enough interest and what have you, and perpetuation of this idea by medical doctors, that I feel absolutely confident that it's a working technology. It needs a lot of improvement, but you're not going to find that amongst the electronics and software crowd. So you stick with what we got, and it could be a massive research effort to take a whole rack of equipment to get this thing fully optimized, and a lot of clinical trials work to determine what exactly is the effective element in this operation. So there's a lot of possibilities there, but from the technical side, but from the sociological side, as we've seen since the first page of the Bible, that the sociological side always seems to thwart the other end of the deal. So that's where the MWO sits today.
I'm going to share this page real quick. So for me, I don't know, maybe 7 years we've been manufacturing the MWO, and when Eric is mentioning one was found and they turned it on and whatever, I think it was 12, maybe even almost 13 years ago, that some European engineers met the niece of a doctor who worked with Lakhovsky, something like that. But anyway, they had some original manufactured units from Lakhovsky that were created up, basically reverse engineered them, put out a report. And to this day right now, besides my company, there's one in Croatia, and we're the only two that are making the MWO according to the reverse engineered specs, so that they're electrically identical to what Lakhovsky had. Mine have been on this vril.io, vril.io. If you mouse over products and you click on the Lakhovsky multi-wave oscillator, there's this page right here, but I'm moving everything to emediapress.com. These are some, this is the original page. It hasn't changed much. This is where Eric and Paul Babcock are talking in Paul's home shop with Paul's homemade MWO, which I witnessed what was going on with it for a couple years before I ever decided to put them into production. And it was because of what I witnessed that I saw that it was worth doing. This is a picture of Eric doing a couple tests here. And this is interesting because these copper rings in this picture here, if you can see that, are actually shorted circles. So essentially they're capacitor plates rather than the open capacitively coupled rings. And so it would be interesting to find out if simple capacitor plates would have the same effect as the, rings with the gaps. But anyway, all this is moving over to emediapress.com, where on emediapress.com, if you scroll down and click this MWO here, the description is pretty much the same, but I kind of rearranged stuff, and there's no claims for these as far as health claims or anything. They're strictly offered as research only units. So you can study exactly how Lakhovsky made his machines, what kind of waveform it creates, and that kind of stuff, for scientific interest and experimentation and whatever. But on this page, there's a PDF. You can just add it to the cart and check out. And that's basically the updated price list and the purchase documents and that kind of stuff. And so eventually everything on vril.io will just forward to this page. And this right here, it's interesting because all the stuff out there claiming to be Lakhovsky multi-wave oscillators are fake. They have absolutely nothing to do with Lakhovsky. He has 3 inherent unbalances. The secondaries have different number of windings on each coil. The distance from the primary on the so-called transmitter coil is a different distance to its secondary compared to the secondary windings on the other coil. So that's the second imbalance. And Lakhovsky grounds one of the phases to an earth rod, which Eric can't stand because normally, I mean, why would you do such a crazy thing? But Lakhovsky is forcing the emission from the antennas through what's between the antennas down to earth. And Eric despised it so much that he he designed a oscillation transformer, which allows you to run the multi-wave oscillator in a balanced mode, which means if you set this unit on top of the pulse modulator and you take the output of the pulse modulator and you plug it into this, and then you take the output of this and you plug it into the backside of the coils on the antennas, now it is equal distance to the antennas, and you can run it in a truly balanced mode. And you can take the like a fluorescent tube and put it between the antennas, and you get that neutral black spot in there. So then you start getting into some of these cosmic induction generator concepts that's been discussed for years by Eric and have been demonstrated at some of the conferences. You're not going to get all the crazy plasma phenomenon inside of tubes and stuff, but you can definitely see that neutral spot. So I would like to see experiments of, germinating seeds inside of that little neutral spot and those type of experiments. So there's a lot of research that could be done on the ever-growing to-do list. So, and with these MWOs, I actually don't take any income from these. What happens is all the sales from the MWOs goes into a fund, and that covers basically all my shop overhead. But the money, and the other funds from that also goes to funding projects. So like when Eric comes to town, and when last few times when Adrian was in town, and the whole Tesla crew were working on these pulse, not pulse modulator, the audio and RF bays, the big rack mount units and stuff. That's all paid for from the MWO. So, and there's other projects funded by the MWO. So when people purchase an MWO, you're basically helping to support and push these projects along. And so I just wanted to mention that. Anything else you want to say, Eric, before I open up for questions? And then we can probably go maybe about a half an hour.
I think that covers everything.
Okay. So if you have a question, yeah. Okay. So Joe, I'm going to unmute you in just a second. I just want to let everybody know if you want to ask a question at the bottom, well, from a desktop view, there is an option called React. And if you click on that, there's a thing that says raise hand. It'll probably be different if you're on a mobile phone. But if you click the raise hand, it'll raise a hand. Then I'll know that you want to ask a question. And then I'll go ahead and click on that. And then after we have some questions live like that by voice, I'll skim through the chat and ask some of the ones that are typed in there. So go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, thank you, Aaron. I'm just wondering, Eric, was the Integratron built to store and focus dielectric energy like the Tesla coil tuned to space? And I'm wondering if you think that it could be used to restore the body's natural energy field along with the MWO?
Well, it kind of was the same as the MWO in that you expose yourself to part of the coil, one quadrant of it, or the set of coils. But its electrostatic component was, as the dome was to be covered with metal on the inside and charged to 100,000 volts. And that would basically connect it to the Earth's electrostatic field. And coils were aligned, their axis points of feed were lined with the tilt of the Earth. So this thing had some kind of geoelectric connection. Other than that, because it was never built, I can't really say any specifics about it, other than one thing I can point out is what I was involved with was basically, you might say, the power supply for the Integratron, but there were higher levels that would have had to occur later, if you understand what I mean, because of the voodoo involved. So I was only the first step. And basically, I was given a set of materials, I was given the existing dimensions, and my knowledge of electricity, and the objective, which was being carried out, was to construct this apparatus. And what I saw in my mind immediately is this thing was a communications device. That if you had one on the moon and you had one on the Earth, if you walked into the door on the one on Earth, you would walk out of the door of the one on the moon. But then again, that's just, you know, my intuitive, how whatever you say, you know, there's no actual confirmation of that. But from all my experience and the way that I perceive things, I immediately perceive this thing to be a so-called transporter.
Any other questions, Joe?
No, thank you, Eric. I appreciate it.
Okay, Thomas.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, just fine.
Awesome. Yeah, I've actually was working with a coil system, and I used ocean materials, and it was basically I filled a giant Tesla coil with these ocean minerals, and I kind of reconstitute them into their monoatomic form. I use this as a healing technique, and it was only later did I realize that it was resembling a lot of what Eric has just devolved into using the longitudinal wave of just energy forms and whatnot. So this was one way that I'm realizing, like the work that I did previously, how it was actually performing these sort of miracles and whatnot. But my question to Eric about the Integratron is the geometry of it. Did you ever glean into any insights on the actual longitudinal wave structure, like just the sound resonance of the building?
Well, the sound resonance was not really, it didn't really relate, and the people that have possession of it now, that's all they relate to. If there was one thing I'll point out about the sound in a hemispherical cavity like that, free of any foreign objects, is, for the lack of a better word, say that you could get the DC component of the sound if you're in one nodal point on the room and another person in the room talks or what have you. It's like you can feel the air pressure from their mouth, which I thought was rather interesting. And
very cool.
Even though that didn't totally relate to the Integratron, other than it would be a hemispherical electrostatic shell with the transformer, Caduceus transformer winding as the floor. And that's probably where the second stage that I had not been able to take it to would have evolved at that point, and some kind of transformer or capacitive element would have gone in that space. So one thing is it's getting worse and worse in society in general, is the misuse of words and using Greek letters for Latin letters and calling a bucket of sand batteries and all these things. The semantics is very important in this stuff. We are not dealing with energy. We've got to get this energy thing out of our mind.
My apologies.
What we're dealing with is called induction. And if you want to relate it to energy, it's energy multiplied by time. And
What
that,
you say is power.
no, that's energy divided by time. So if you take the rate at which energy is created or destroyed, that's called power. If you take the accumulation of energy, either, it's accumulation or it's deaccumulation, that's the induction. It's a concept that basically Max Planck came up with. And that's why I named that particular dimensional relationship the Planck. That is the fundamental corpuscle of electricity that J.J. Thomson was formulating, and electron was an accidental derivative out of this that the physicists got all caught up on and took it off in their own direction, but that is not what J.J. Thomson wanted. So we're dealing with the corpuscles of electricity, which is a derivative of the ether, and not the mechanical ether of Maxwell and all those people, but more of the ether of the esoteric concepts of antiquity.
I went through the Western education system, and it's still taking me. I've been listening to you, trying religiously, and it's still taking me a long time to get the brainwashing out. So again, my apologies. I've heard your lectures many times, and it's finally starting to click in. But yeah, it's still the language is, as you're right, the semantics of it is still lingering.
So
yeah, it's tough to get it out of your head. I mean, I had to go through 12 years of feral existence, running barefoot through the forest, eating leaves and berries to get it out of my head.
We share some similar paths. I was also homeless in San Francisco when I was doing this work.
Yeah, hopefully it was at a time in which it was conducive when I was there in the 70s, but basically after Dianne Feinstein, San Francisco ceased to exist. I'm a third generation San Franciscan, and I'll tell you right now, there is no more San Francisco. Bulldozed.
Yeah, I see it.
But that's kind of getting off topic. So I didn't mean to jump.
One more.
Okay, go ahead.
One more question. So the induction field that the Integratron was creating, there's you said that there was like a space that you didn't know what it was or if anything went in there. Do you know if it was just completely empty space, like it was in the bottom level of the building at the center?
Well, there's a capacitive coupling element in the column in the center of the Integratron, and it appeared that something lowered down in there and possibly conveyed whatever, the induction into the upper part. But the one thing about Van Tassel's work, it all revolved around something called the Caduceus coil, where you have a pair of windings wound backwards on each other. And I don't know, I had a lot of his models and things back then. Of course, that stuff's all lost now. Myself and Chris Carson worked with those and made some modifications. And then our experiments, Chris and myself, had indicated that that what was going on was not transverse and was not longitudinal, is what is called scalar, meaning that it had no variation or form in space. It kind of, you would be able to communicate from one apparatus to another without having to deal with the effects of space in between. Of course, this was all very preliminary stuff, and Chris died before any of this had really taken off. But now this scalar has nothing to do with this Tom Bearden scalar wave. All that is just a bunch of malarkey. That's some kind of physics delusion from their useless mathematics that they seem to cling so dearly to and demand that everybody worship. But and again, this has become a semantic problem. Is you get these fraudulent expressions, and then the lemmings all run towards the fraudulent expressions and basically trample the lemmings that want to go the other way. And it's just human behavior. There's nothing we can do about it.
Right. So the two coils that were wrapped, one was like copper or iron in the Integratron. They were supposed to be counter rotating, right?
Yeah, one was
Yeah.
clockwise and one was counterclockwise. Now, which one was clockwise and which one was counterclockwise, iron or copper? Well, that
You
was,
don't know.
I didn't know, so I had to I just put it up. So
Was there any way to measure any of these like induction potentials when you were working with it? Like, I guess you never actually turned the system on, right?
well, the thing is, I got the copper coil up, which was not easy to put 5,000 feet of wire up on the ceiling, 90 turns. Not the thing coming
Yeah,
down.
that's crazy.
And so the first step was, at that point, once I got to this point, the place was taken away from us by the women in white or Commonweal or whatever. That's its own investigation. I really like to see somebody dig into it. I'm sure it'd be even gooier than what we're getting from the Democrats and all that stuff today, if not the progenesis of it. But at any rate, the copper coil went up, and then I operated it as a flat spiral Tesla coil. Its response frequency was 111 kilocycles. And that's when all of a sudden it hit me. This thing could become a regenerative receiver. And at that point, I wanted to try to get the thing to receive on that frequency. And then once that was done, then the iron wire coil would go up. And then, now technically I should have taken the copper wire coil down and then put the iron wire coil up. But, as you can imagine, the labor, and what have you, I mean, I was just going to proceed along getting the physical. What I was there for was to get this thing wound, to get the metallization on the dome. The rotor could never work, but there was a March generator there to generate the 100,000 volts. So my objective was to set up all the compressed air controlled spark gaps, to get 100,000 volts on the dome, and get the coils wound and take it from there.
Would it be possible to use all the documentation you have to build a scale model?
It's completely conceivable. I can't see why not. I mean, I don't think it'd be cheap. And then
You have enough documentation, all the dimensions and everything?
well, the dimensions of the building still exist in its presence. And the
Are you going to go back there and measure it?
so somebody else can go there and deal with them. But the dimensions, now they tore all this stuff out after we lost the place, and then they put a fraudulent coil up, which is not insulated, just be groovy. But unless
There was a
let me finish. Unless they're going to go up there with a hammer and smash all the pins off and all that, the dimensions are available to scale and get the information, build scale model of it, which is fairly elementary. In fact, you might even be able to get the die rod rotor to work because it would be smaller. That's what stopped the Integratron project, is they could not get that rotor finished. And they were running out of money and they were pulling a dog and pony show. By 1965, the whole thing basically fell apart and afterwards became no more than a space people dog and pony show, which didn't do a lot for its credibility. But as far as building a scale model goes, it's totally feasible if you can find, the necessary craftsmen and the money and et cetera to do it. The dimensionality of the situation is, it's ultimately basic.
Cool. Good to know. Well, appreciate your time. Thanks.
Okay,
Okay,
thanks.
welcome.
Let's see. So the more things I have to edit out, the longer it takes me to get this on YouTube.
Yeah, but the more he entertains the question askers.
Yeah, hold on a second, Christopher. I'll get you in just a second. I shared this picture of Lone Pine Writings, or this page. So if you go to emediapress.com and you search for Lone Pine Writings, this page will come up. You can get this part 1 book here in a digital download, or you can go to Amazon, search for Lone Pine Writings, and you can get it in a paperback. And it's available on Amazon internationally. Depends on where you are. It's in most of them. In English, though. And I'm just bringing this up because when Eric is talking about, the using proper vocabulary and that kind of stuff, this book would probably be Eric Dollard 101. If you want to learn the basics in the language, getting the dimensions correct from Eric's perspective and what he's trying to teach, it would be recommended for everybody to study Lone Pine writings. Would that be fair to say, Eric?
Yeah, that's where it begins. I mean, after Landers was destroyed and I became a refugee in Owens Valley, the only thing for me to do was to sit down without any references and from scratch and rewrite the entire theory of electricity. And that's where it began.
Okay, Christopher, I think you're unmuted. Go.
Well, let me point out one other thing, Aaron.
Yeah, go ahead.
Now, there's further developments of that, and that's the Heaviside electromagnetic induction and its propagation, which is a presentation and a book. So for those that are more technically and mathematically inclined, once you get primed by the common language for electrical engineers text, then you can keep going all the way up to the full theory of electromagnetism is developed by Oliver Heaviside, which is still generally not known amongst the physicists. They're so wrapped up in their primitive stuff that they've never been able to complete Heaviside's work in that regard, but I did.
So on emediapress.com, if you just type in the word propagation in the product search at the top right, this is a series of books, Electromagnetic Induction and Its Propagation, a sequel of the work of Oliver Heaviside of the same title, Part 1. I think that's a 3-part series as far as the books. So it's a digital download, and these are also on Amazon as paperbacks, if that's what you prefer. And then this is the presentation, and there might be, two presentations on this?
No, that was one.
That was one. So
Yeah.
I think this is also a 4-hour or something presentation. 180 minutes, so three hours from the 2020 conference. I like how fast that comes up now. We migrated the server. It's brand new. We got light speed on there and the whole 9 yards. So if you have been coming to the eMedia Press site, you'll notice that the speed is blazing. So that's at least one thing working that I can be happy about in terms of the digital world. But okay, Christopher, I just asked you to unmute.
Understood. I got it. Thank you, team.
Got it. Okay, go ahead.
Hello, team. Thank you for talking with me, Eric. Quite a legend. I'm a retiree from the Army. I was overseas in Afghanistan, couldn't shower, couldn't shave, no water, and I taught myself electrical engineering. I'm a current mechanical engineer, doing refrigeration from home. But my question to you, Eric, is just a statement and a question. The maker, I forget the gentleman who had Integratron, said that he could see into the past and could witness radio stations from the past, and that drop down cubbyhole was there for a camera to slide down there and take pictures of the past. Now, I don't validate anything he said. I'm just trying to relay information to the group. And could it be,
Cool.
as Aaron said, that the capacitor plates of the Lakhovsky multilating oscillator, could it just be mimicking that, in that there's a positive and negative capacitance that is reflecting off each other that can be tuned, like you said, from different parts of the universe?
Well, that's anybody's guess, I mean, you kind of loaded me up there.
I did, and I do apologize.
Yeah.
So I'll just sign off and let others ask questions and listen to your response. Thank you. Appreciate you. Thanks, team.
So what do you think, Eric? If somebody now, you mentioned that Eric, you said that Van Tassel mentioned in the 50s or something Lakhovsky's multi-wave oscillator. What book would that be in? And I was surprised how many books there actually were of Van Tassel's. I'll just show an Amazon screenshot here. I just typed in George Van Tassel books. When Stars Look Down, I think that's one of the more popular ones. The Council of Seven Lights. I Wrote a Flying Saucer. The Mystery of the Flying Saucers Revealed. Let's see. The Eye of Certainty. That looks like a compilation of some of his stuff. Into This World and Out Again. And there's different compilations of, I don't know if these were newsletters or whatever, but do you know where that comment of his came from about the MWO?
Well, my reference that was provided to me for my effort was When Stars Look Down. That's where Van Tassel presents his overall theory of things, and I believe that's where he talks about the MWO. The other ones, there wasn't really much of anything. That was mostly space people stuff. Even though I would recommend to anybody that wants to really get the little bits and pieces. I mean, to properly deal with this subject, you would have to read every word he wrote and then kind of sort things out, in the way that that you would find acceptable.
Okay. And hey, Christopher, if you don't mind, just asking you to mute real quick. Those things that you shared about the Integratron and the claims of, past radio stations and that kind of stuff, were those out of any of George Van Tassel's books, or where did those come from?
Right. So the way I taught myself electrical engineering, and
Okay.
I do apologize for the background noise. I took my kids to a bouncy place.
Okay.
It's on a YouTube. I taught all myself pretty much via YouTube. So there's a YouTube tip with George Van Tassel, and if you message me, I can send it to you because it's saved on my videos. And I put it all together. Whereas I heard Eric from a different time in my life, and then I heard George Van Tassel at a different time in my life, and I was like, oh, these things are related. And there's more, like you said, the voodoo, and I do believe that the voodoo is there's a scientific term for it that I don't want to get into, but yeah. And I wanted to ask Eric before I muted myself, the Integratron on Earth functions at a different frequency. How would it be tuned to a different planet when that different planet has a different frequency? You get my drift? Maybe
No, it's not the Integratron geometry itself is the kind of establishes the wavelength, so to speak. So if you created equivalent situations, it'd be like if you have a resonance circuit tuned to 1 megacycle at the transmitting site and you have one tuned to 1 megacycle at the receiving site, you're liable to get communications. Obviously, there's, you're pointing out there's other complications and all that, but there's no way to know any of these things. All I can do is just throw out speculations, which I'm not inclined to do. I only want to.
Me too. That's why I didn't want to speculate.
Yeah, I can only talk about what I know. Just to speculate forever, it reminds me of the Haight-Ashbury days. Everyone smoking dope to 4 in the morning, working their mouths until they're totally dehydrated, but nothing's been said.
Absolutely, I do agree with you. We got to get rid of this religion. It's totally keeping our species down. It's a what's it called? A progression of the human species that just needs to happen a whole lot sooner. I believe it happens at other places in the universe, but we got to get rid of it.
Well, nature will take its course.
Okay. Thanks, Christopher. And if you have my email, info@emediapress.com, if you don't mind sending that YouTube link, I would kind of like to see whatever interview or whatever Van Tassel is saying about it.
Can't do easy.
And there's also a text chat here if anybody in the chat is interested in seeing George Van Tassel on video talking about this. Feel free to post it in here for everybody too.
All right, we'll do.
Okay, appreciate it. Thanks, Christopher. Okay, let's see, it's 1:25, got maybe 10 minutes, something like that. Okay, Franco, asking you to unmute and go ahead and ask your question.
Hello. My question is for Eric. I was wondering if the Integratron system was anyhow connected to Earth, ground connection or something?
No, it was floating.
Floating. Okay. Another question, if Eric can say something about the energy synthesis process and the ground connection, the ground reference itself, if there is any relation into this process.
Well, the Integratron didn't have a ground, and it wasn't necessarily energy synthesis, so I can't see how that really connects to the Integratron.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Franco. Hey, Adrian, you got a second?
Sure.
Hey, so yeah, it's been a while since we've been on a call or whatever, kind of been out of touch. But I would like to sometime here in the near future do another, catch up call on everybody's
Sure.
projects and stuff like that if you're up
Sure.
for it. And
Definitely.
okay. And then Adrian is also somebody who's replicated the MWO out of the same reverse engineering plans that came out 12, 13 years ago, something like that. And he has that posted on his website too. And the stuff he's posting on the MWO is a lot more technical than, mine is more of like history and just kind of a cell page content. But he did a lot of measurements and that kind of stuff is posted on his website, which is am-innovations.com. Or is it innovation or innovations?
Innovations. am-innovations.com.
Plural. Okay. And he has a wealth of material on there, videos and blog posts and a lot of stuff related to a lot of the experiments and projects we're doing here in Spokane and that kind of stuff. So check it out. And I'll get together with Eric and Adrian off the call later on, and we'll try to organize a call with Connor and everybody else who's been helping out down in Tonopah to kind of do a catch-up call. And because a lot of people are working on their own projects too. A lot of them are kind of related. And so,
That would be good.
yeah. Okay. Looking forward to it.
Okay, me too.
So we'll take, let's see, Zoltan, unmuting you right now.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
Quick question. What is the significance of the iron coil? I did not understand there is a copper coil, iron coil. Why?
Did you hear that, Eric? Why is there an iron coil? There's a copper one and an iron, and how does iron play into it?
Well, that's, again, I can only speculate. Obviously, the iron has magnetic permeability, and the copper has magnetic reflectivity. So somehow there's an interaction there. Also, the wavefront propagation will be different on an iron coil than it will be on a copper coil. It will be slower. So there's an interference pattern there. The only thing I could recommend is to build a scale model of a copper coil with 90 turns going one way and a iron coil going the other way, and make sure they're insulated and make sure you don't get any breakdown on where the iron and copper wires cross. That's important. And experiment. That's the first start to duplicating this. Now, I found a Van Tassel model that had 9 turns, and it had 9 magnets weaved into turns, wound on a piece of linoleum in his underground laboratory. You have to go underground out there in the Mojave Desert to get away from the heat. I have no idea what he was after. I don't want to speculate. All I can deal with is, the actual physical and basically induction end of the thing. I can't go beyond that and just start guessing, because most likely I would be wrong. So duplication is in order.
Right. Any other question? Okay. All right. If anybody wants to ask one more question, we got time for that, and then we'll go ahead and end the call. If you have a final question, just click on the react button and click raise hand, and then I'll know to unmute you. Any final comments, Eric?
No, it looks like we've exhausted the subject.
Okay, I'm gonna go to ericpdollar.com. Let me do a share real quick here. So again, EPD Laboratories Inc. Is a 501c3 nonprofit based out of Nevada. It's down in Tonopah, and that's where the shop is down there, where Eric is, mostly writing, and as money and help is available working on projects down there. It's solely funded by donations. So if you go to ericpdollar.com, click on the donate link in the main menu bar, and either by PayPal, all donations are really appreciated. That helps to pay for, building property tax, insurance, utilities, parts and materials for the projects that's being worked on. That helps with some transportation and stuff for, like Connor or Justin or Hawkesses and anybody else coming down to, make progress on some of these projects. And then, of course, we share these in a blog posts and videos and on these live calls. And I'm planning on going down there sometime in the near future. I got to get a few more milestones done with this one project that I've been dedicating full time on the last X amount of months, picking up where we left off after Paul Babcock died. So as soon as I get to a couple things of a completion on that, then I'm going to be planning on going down to Tonopah, and we'll come out with a lot more videos of what's going on down there with some updates. Okay, got one final question, and we'll go ahead and end the call. Adam, space case 0, should be an unmute. Yeah, go for it.
Okay, the transmitter he's building, I would love to know the frequencies so I can build an antenna and listen.
The Tesla transmitter,
Yeah,
the frequency is going to be 1999 kilocycles.
thank you very much.
And then I've seen a written question asking if there's more books. Basically, that's pretty much all I can do here right now is write books because of the lack of physical help. And I've completed 4 books, but the same snag appears in that there's no money to have them properly transcribed and put into publication. So presently, I am writing a book on the 3-phase process, because what's going awry with the electrical utility right now is so extreme that I've decided to focus all of my future writings on the understanding of polyphase power. The book beforehand that's been completed is Pythagorean coordinate system. It's a rather lengthy book. It would cost a fortune to transcribe, several hundred pages. That's something that nobody's ever done before, which is to fully expand on the numerology of Pythagoras and the coordinate system and the 9-string instrument that develops out of it. Prior to that, there's 2 mathematical publications that don't require any transcription because I don't have time for the English part. Those will probably come out relatively soon because it's just a matter of photocopying. And then there is the second volume of the Tesla 4-phase presentation that somebody was transcribing and then flaked out and disappeared. I don't know what's happening with that. So At any rate, I spend about 4 or 5 hours a day, 7 days a week writing, and it'd be nice if somebody would throw a nice big chunk of money out so I could get this transcribed. I mean, it is fun and educational for me to do it, but it's also disgusting that no one will ever get to see this stuff. So,
Well, that four-phase book, yeah, I don't know if they're gonna put it into my hands so I can actually put it into, do a final edit and put it into a PDF. I hope I don't have to do it from scratch. That person committed to it and it was supposed to be sent to me a couple times, and so who knows. But what my plan is there's one of the like overhead type scanners, 1 page per second. You just flip the page and it scans it waiting there and down there in Tonopah. And I think when Connor gets down there next, he's going to help scan all the remaining notes of Eric for everything that has been written. And as soon as I have those, OCR has optical character recognition has evolved quite a bit over the last couple years. And then tying it in with some of this AI stuff with Grok or whatever, I'm going to experiment on seeing where it is now. Because when I tried to do it in the past, it just, it might as well just start from scratch. But I think where it's at right now could potentially make it an easy job where for the most part it can transcribe it, put it into a Word doc, and then it would just have to be, do a couple readovers. So that's the route that I'm going to go with it, to just see if we can expedite those, because it is time consuming. Not just that, not everybody can transcribe Eric's work, because there's going to be things that people are going to say, well, this is supposed to be singular, that's supposed to be plural. They're going to edit stuff that they think needs to be edited, but a lot of those things are intended to be that way, and you're not going to know that unless you've known Eric for a while, know how he writes and what he's kind of intending. So it's not just anybody can come in and transcribe this stuff, because they're going to correct a lot of. So it's
well,
kind
there's a lot of mathematical protocol too. That you have to have a good education in mathematics to really be able to formulate a lot of those things. I just saw a little comment, and this is what I've been conceiving as the way out, because I don't want this material to get lost. I have basically 8 years invested in here with these presentations that I've done and all these writings and what have you. Is just to do the old Borderland way and just photocopy the notebooks. And the drawings are where all the action's at, and the drawings aren't edited. Those are complete. And it's just going to have to go that route to start with. And maybe that would, somebody could pick up on that and do the transcription.
Yeah, so publishing them as scans, we did some of that in the past. That's easy to do. I mean, as soon as Connor or whoever takes that scanner that's down there, gets those, they're essentially already ready to just be dropped into a Word doc and exported as a PDF. So we can go that route. I do want to experiment with that, transcription with some of the more advanced OCR, so-called AI stuff, and we'll see how that goes. But we can certainly put them out as the original scans, just to get them out. Okay, any final comments, Eric, or announcements or anything? And as far as the donations go, what would be a next chunk that would be helpful to bring some of the next projects to completion? We already bought the solar panels and the batteries and all that stuff for the shack, but there's a handful of materials and that kind of stuff Connor still needs to get. So what would you think? I mean, if there was, say $5,000 for the next episode, that would be able to cover probably quite a bit of the materials and travel and that kind of stuff to make a lot of progress on a shack project and whatever, right?
Yeah, I mean, right now, the material thing's set up pretty good. I'd say, another $5,000 would make things comfortable. The main problem I have right now is cooperation. No one's interested in any of this anymore. And that's what I'm up against. I mean, I'm here every day. And I need to get outside at my age, and be doing this stuff, but nobody will show up. Nobody will answer the phone. No one will call back. What can I do? I mean, I got everything all set up. There's more stuff, that does need to be bought, like you pointed out. But the thing is there have been 2 or 3 substantial donations that have primed this project and have, incentivized me into moving forward. But human cooperation is a thing of the past, and that's what I'm up against. It's either that or flat out pay contractors. It's $14,000 for the contractor to run the communications line from the seismograph mine to the building here. And then the special cable, I've got to spend another $1,000 to pick it up. So there's $15,000 right there that can go into the seismograph end of the deal. But and that is a very important end, because that finally cements our position as a public utility here in Tonopah, because we have right-of-ways in town and joint pull agreements and all that kind of stuff. And that would cement all of that. And we get a lot more cooperation out of the public utility companies. So there's more to, you might say, the political rather than the technical end there. But the objective that I don't want to stray from is to get the earth signals on the air and get the Tesla transmitter on the air, and everything else is secondary. And right now that is mainly a sociological rather than a financial or a technical complication.
And I'll do what I can to get something coordinated, whether it's when I go down there or not, to do this soon, because we want these signals on the air. I'd like to see it by fall, September, something like that, which I think is possible with that Wi-Fi broadcaster deal that Hawkes says is supposed to be setting up, rather than by the end of the year. But I'll do what I can.
That was the plan. I mean, basically, most of that was supposed to be done by now, but all I get is dead air.
Okay, well, thanks everybody for being on the call. I'll get this on YouTube as soon as I get this edited and put the titles on there and URLs and all that kind of stuff. And that'll be on YouTube. That it'll be announced out in the Energy Times. If you're not a subscriber, emediapress.com/Energy Times. That's my free newsletter where pretty much all the announcements and everything goes out. So I'll announce when this is online, and if you want to share it with your friends. And so anyway, thanks everybody. Good to see you, Adrian. Thanks, Eric. And we'll be in touch. Talk to everybody later.
Okay, see you later.
Okay.